So today I'm going to talk about four different things: planning, delivery, assessment, and communication. So starting with planning. When I'm planning for a specific course, let's say mathematics, I like to lay out all the outcomes in front of me. So for grade 3-4, I would have the grade 3 outcomes and the grade 4 specific learning outcomes, and I would find those overlaps within each grade. By gathering those overlaps, I like to gather them even further into groups and create topics, for example. So I love planning this way with multi-age because I get to save time by hitting more than one outcome in one lesson. As well, within the classroom, once I introduce a topic to the grade 3s, for example, say in measurement, when they get working, I can keep the grade 4s and then we can extend on this topic. I love doing this, especially for those students in grade 3 that might excel in mathematics and need that extra bit of challenge. When teaching a lesson and being able to extend on it, those students can get that extra challenge when sometimes they might finish their work fast and then cause disruptions in the class, and then our classroom management techniques have to step in. But by planning this way and keeping those lessons working off of each other, you can create meaningful lessons as well keep more students engaged in what they are learning. So going back, once I have those groups, I like to order them and see which topics just flow into each other. So for example, adding and subtracting, measurement, multiplying and dividing. I also like seeing which topics should be revisited. So with mathematics, again, you can't start with adding and subtracting and forget about it throughout the rest of the year. That's not how mathematics works. Same thing with English. You can't teach students how to write a complete sentence with adjectives and adverbs and then forget about it for the rest of the year. You need to keep those topics building on each other throughout the year and keep revisiting those things. So once I have the topics and what order they go in, I can create a scope and sequence. A scope and sequence helps me because I see what kind of lessons I will be teaching throughout the month and where we'll be going and what am I going to head into, just so I can keep myself on track and keep my students learning on track as well. With that scope and sequence, I can narrow it down to the months and maybe even the weeks and what will be taught throughout the weeks. I don't like planning lessons specifically before I meet my students because what may have worked last year for grade 3-4 might not work for this year's grade 3-4. I don't know how the students learn, so I don't want to do those specific things and then have to recreate all of my units come September. So with that leading into delivery, I get to meet my students, I get to know them, I get to know how they learn, I get to know about what they like to learn about, and then we get to create our learning environment in the first few weeks of school. So by creating that learning environment, I mean maybe adjusting furniture. I know when I was doing mathematics, I was always lying on the floor when I was at home. I could never do mathematics sitting at a desk. Now today's student, maybe they like to stand up. Maybe they need some kind of technology incorporated in the classroom. And by creating that learning environment, my delivery process will be engaging and can help more students learn just by adjusting the learning environment we are in. So I have my scope and sequence, I have my monthly plans, and now I know my students, so I get to go home and plan those specific lessons. I like keeping the UDL perspective in mind and touching on as many learning styles as I can. Maybe I can do that through thematic units, through workstations. Again, this all has to do with the students that walk through my classroom because each student is different and every year it will be different. I like keeping students involved in what they're learning and by incorporating those certain topics that they learn, because when students are at the center of their learning, they are more engaged and more interested in what they're learning about, and it makes my job that much more easier. And by keeping them involved, they get excited about what they're learning about. So by keeping them involved, that even includes the assessment piece. So by having students involved in the assessment piece, I mean that maybe we'll have a project due, but instead of me just giving them a rubric or giving them a checklist that they need to follow, we can create that together. So what do they think they should be assessed on? What have we talked about? What should be included? In the past, I have seen the 101 ways to show you what I know. I want to have that in my classroom because some students maybe aren't good at writing a test. Maybe some students aren't good at writing an essay or aren't good at writing a story, but they feel like they can create a video like this or maybe do a poster. By keeping the student at the center of their learning, it kind of releases that anxiety that's on their shoulders and they're able to take a breath because, well, I get to choose how I can show you what I know. You're not telling me to take a test in the next 2 weeks. And especially with mental health being such a big issue with today's student and being a really big topic in the world, I don't want my students walking in my classroom and feeling scared or anxious that they have to write a test. That's not how I want them to show me what they learned. There's so many different ways out there, and by keeping them involved in the assessment and by having them choose their assessment practice just is better for their learning and for my assessment as well. I like keeping a balance between observational and product-based assessment. Again, takes the stress off the student that there's not always going to be a project at the end of a unit. I like seeing the learning that happens in the moment. It's great when you see the student's face when they get that like aha moment, and then I can take those anecdotal notes and incorporate that in the report card rather than just having those products to work off of. I like speaking to students like, oh, well, what have you learned throughout this project, or what have you learned throughout this book or this lesson? What do they know, and what further can I develop that knowledge that they already know, or something that I may have taught them but they even extended with their critical thinking. I like keeping assessment ongoing, whether it be through those observations. Maybe at the end of the day we do an exit slip or just a 10-minute discussion of what did you learn today. I love doing KWL charts with what they know, what they want to know, and what they learned, whether it be daily, weekly, monthly, throughout the unit, etc. One of the things I do in my classroom right now, we'll stand in line at the end of the day and I say, if I was your parent and I asked you what you learned at school today, instead of saying nothing, what could you say? And I get a variety of answers. Sometimes it pertains to the lesson that we taught today. Maybe it's something they got off the lesson. Maybe it's something they researched once they were in a different class. It helps me because I get to see what they took out of my lesson, what they went further with their learning, and where I can go with that. So with that, that leads into lastly communication. And by creating that classroom community with my students, I get to have these answers and have that open line of communication where I can ask them what they learned today or where they want to do, where they want to go with their learning. I want my classroom community to be respectful, responsible, and safe. I want students to feel open to communicate with me as well as each other. Creating those strong relationships opens that line of communication. I want students to get to know me as well as each other because it's important for them to be open with me, but if maybe they don't want to talk to me, they can talk to someone that's in their class. You can create those relationships by, again, at the beginning of the year, and maybe throughout the year you can adjust the table seating or where they're sitting in the classroom, incorporate group work. In my recent placement, they did just a half an hour lesson each cycle about social skills. How to introduce yourself, daily greetings, speaking with each other, how important body language is, tone of voice. I want to incorporate those communication, social skills because maybe some students won't be able to learn that at home, and maybe if they take that out, if they go home and that's what they take out of the day from speaking with me, then that's awesome. Communication with parents. I like keeping an open line of communication with parents, whether it be through a classroom website, monthly newsletters, having my contact information through email or the school's phone number. I like keeping parents in the know and keeping them involved in what their student is doing at school. I don't want to be that teacher that sends home a report card and the parent comes to me and is surprised of what is on there. For example, if a parent comes in and says, my student's been doing poorly in social studies, how come I wasn't informed on this before? That's not something that I'd want to experience as a parent. So as a teacher, I want to have no surprises. I don't want to just relay the negative things that have been happening in school. I want to share positive things, that your student did amazing in social studies on this project, that today they were able to speak in class, anything like that. Just having that respectable open line of communication with parents helps create that support system that many students need to further their career in education. As well, I want to open up volunteering in my classroom with parents. Volunteering is very hard because today's parent is very busy as well as today's student, but just having that option where they can come in and volunteer in like class projects or anything like that. As well, there's always conflict with parents, not every parent, but with some. I want to create that 24-hour rule where if you have a conflict, you can come to me, but let's wait 24 hours because I don't want emotions getting involved. And this enables me to communicate with fellow colleagues, with the principal, with anyone that I can, because especially because I'm so new to this field, I don't know everything and I don't know where I could go and what information I should gather. I want to keep the principal in the know as well. So planning, delivery, assessment, and communication have all been covered.